Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first ever Facebook Live. My name is Susan Hayes Culleton, and I am here to take you through all of the points that we raised during our introduction and also during the email that you would have received, or during the Facebook notification that you would have received a little while ago. So the first and foremost, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. So I am co-author of Positive Economics. You can see it here. This is the book that is in our secondary schools now, right around the country. And also I'm co-author of the previous Positive Economics, which is the book that predated this one. So independent of whether you are studying economics for Leaving Cert based on the new syllabus, which had just started for those of you in 5th year, or for those of you who started or who wanted to, or sorry, those of you who are doing your Leaving Cert based on the previous system, where you would be doing your Leaving Cert this year, this podcast / video is just for you. Okay, so the first thing that I said I was going to do was I was going to give you a couple of sites that are useful from the point of view of speeding up the study, and where you can get stuff that's really, really quick, and where it's super useful, but also where it can help you dramatically increase your productivity, get everything all together. And as I say, in my opinion, it's something that can be very, very helpful. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to show you the first of those. Now, this is my favorite one. This is the monthly economic bulletins. The monthly economic bulletins, I find, are just super, 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 super helpful. What they do is they have all of the major indicators all in together, and you can basically find how they're going on and what's going on in the economy very, very quickly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to just scroll down here. So in 2019, for example, the latest monthly economic bulletin is in October. I'm just going to click on October here. Okay, and if I scroll down here and I download it, okay, I'm just going to download it right now, and look what's in here. So it's a 13-page document, and it basically gives you so many of the indicators that you need for your Leaving Cert, just all in here together. So for example, all of those of you particularly who have done national income, probably the biggest and most impactful chapter of the book in terms of what you need to know for the economy anyway, it's all in here. So here's C plus I plus G plus NX. So consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports, exports and imports. The GDP figure, the GNP figure, and here it is in terms of quarter over the last couple of years. And we also have the annual figures, and you also have the forecasts. So it's all there given to you. Based on, of course, what we're going to talk about tonight, which is where things stand at Brexit, you can also see here what it would look like, what the economy might look like from a projected point of view if there is an orderly Brexit versus a disorderly Brexit. Really, really helpful figures there from the point of view of your exams. And just having those figures at the tip of your tongue. Now, I will say it's not just Leaving Cert that this is helpful for. Believe me, I refer to this all the time. I also lecture in economics as part of a wider program on capital markets, and I direct my students, my post, that would be postgraduate level, I still send them to this report because it's just got such an amount of useful information. Then you can have all of the expectations from the point of view of the UK and the US and the euro area. You can also get the trade figures. So those of you who might want the trade figures for the balance of payments, or the fact that we're a very open economy, it's all in there and all very, very simple. Here is the consumption figures, the inflation figures, both at harmonized index, but also the CPI. And we refer particularly to the CPI in the book. Then down here, of course, we have employment. There's a lot of focus on employment in the book. So here you've got the figures of employment. And by the way, I just mentioned this, the 2.3 million people in employment in Ireland, largest figure on history, or on record in history. You can also see The youth unemployment rate, you can see a variety of things in there. And of course, we also get wages. So what are the earnings on an hourly basis, public sector, private sector, and so on. Further, as we move on down here, of course, the big conversation at the moment is housing. And very interesting to watch the residential property prices. Now, prices aren't falling. This is the year-on-year change. So it just means that the rate of growth has slowed down. Dublin is almost at a falling level, contrary to what you might be hearing in the news. And we're going to have a future Facebook Live all around housing because, of course, it is such a big topic in so many ways. It pertains to rent, pertains to homelessness, pertains to housing prices, pertains to foreign direct investment, so many issues. So that is going to be the topic of the next Facebook Live. And then as we go down here, also tourism. So the Wild Atlantic Way, again, changes in Brexit, the strengthening of the dollar, so many economic indicators impacted by tourism, and you have all of the figures here. And then we have the exchequer balance, the general government balance. So this is all about how much money we're taking in on tax, how much, of course, we're spending, and how much is left over afterwards. Again, that's a whole, I could do a whole Facebook Live on looking at government finances. Again, quite a significant part of the new syllabus. It was a bigger part of the other syllabus, I have to say. And then you have a couple of links here. So this is my #1 go-to document, and it's updated every single month, and it's published by the Department of Finance. So if you think, let's say, I don't know whether you're a student or whether you're a teacher on tonight, and of course, if you're simply interested in the economy, you are so welcome. So welcome to join us, of course. So what I would say there is, this is the document that I go to with a view to getting as much as I can in the one place, dynamically updated by the Department of Finance. So that was my first one. Okay, that will save you so much time. So much time. Now, if we move on then to the second one, I also want to show you this one, okay? Now, this is the DBEI dashboard. So the DBEI is the Department of Business and Enterprise and Innovation. And what they have is, now I have registered on an email, so I get this, actually the one that I wanted just actually arrived in yesterday on the 4th of December. And it's basically, right, it's basically a dashboard of 60 economic indicators across the areas of jobs, enterprise and innovation. Now, some of these will not be of interest to you, right? And that's fine. The point is that you have what you want. So some of them may not be, they may not be particularly what you're looking for. But again, you'll have sectoral employment in there. So like, one of the areas that would have come up in big conversation in the economy in Ireland would have been construction 10 years ago, right? So 10 years ago, very few people were working in construction. We had very few houses that were being built. And of course, we're feeling the fallout of that now. Now, if you had this dashboard, then you could have very easily seen how construction employment has changed over the last quarter and how it's changed over a particular period of time. For example, up here, see the way now construction is up 4,300. Look at this information and communication, we're up 8,200. Of course, a big portion of that would be the tech firms that have technology, like whether it might be Facebook or LinkedIn or eBay. Of course, we have the headquarters, the European headquarters of a lot of these companies are in Ireland. So this is what that refers to, and so on, right? And so on from there. And then you can see down here, accommodation, food, you can see in the last quarter that is down by 5,500. Again, coming back to what you probably already know, this is because there's a lot of seasonal changes in the hospitality sector, because during the summer months we have a big an increase in tourism. Depends how deeply you want to go on that, of course. And then over here we have how unemployment is all around the country. Sorry, my screen is just changed there now. So, for example, we can see that the unemployment rate in Dublin, and no surprise there, is at 4.5%. It's the lowest in the country, whereas the southeast actually has the lowest amount of, not the lowest amount of employment, the highest amount of unemployment. They're not the same thing. Just want to make that point, because the difference between the number of people employed and unemployed are, for example, the people who are emigrating or immigrating. And also there are some people, of course, who are choosing to stay out of the workforce for a period of time. That might be people who are carers, carers for elderly parents, or they could be parents themselves caring for young children. So they would be housewives, house husbands, stay-at-home moms, stay-at-home dads, etc. Okay, so just don't assume that 1 minus the unemployment rate is the employment rate. That's not the case. Okay, so as you can see, so there's a lot of interactive features here, and well, there's a case in point. That's where you can see exactly who is seeking work, who are employed, etc., etc. Okay, so and there's lots and lots in there, and I think it's a super resource. Again, it's something that I go back to. Now, real, just again the word real. Those of you who've been studying economics for a longer period of time, you'll know that real means inflation adjusted. So the real or inflation adjusted average weekly earnings, as you can see, the country is now, our earnings are rising. That's not to say that everyone in the country is earning €718.19 per week, factoring in inflation. That's not to say that. That is an average figure. That includes people who are on the minimum wage, which is currently €9.80 an hour, as well as those who are very well paid, as well as, of course, everybody in between. It doesn't, I can't really tell an awful lot from that, apart from that the average is rising. For sure, there are people who are, around the country whose wages have fallen over the last number of years. There are people who, again, let's say if I was to go back to the construction section there, some people may have a lot of money back then. Sorry, now I'm going to have to make sure my emails are switched off. Okay, so you may have seen that, or sorry, those people may have seen that their wages would have been quite high when they were in construction. Then they might have gone back to work or gone back to study in a different way, and they would have had to take maybe a significant pay cut to do that. And now they could be in a different job that pays a different rate. Let's say that the construction sector would have back then. So it's simply an average figure. But what it does tell us is that the overall macro trend of wages in Ireland are increasing. Okay, so as you can see here, loads and loads in here. You decide what you want out of it, but it's just really handy and really interactive. And again, somebody else is doing the work for you in terms of getting this up to date. There's also then there are other indicators there in terms of enterprise innovation and the UK. So I won't go any further than that, but just to let you know that that's there also. And of course, just like I said in the comment that we opened up on, is that this is available. The recording of this video will be certainly available, but not alone that, we will also be putting all of the links, the live links together on a blog post and putting it on our blog so that it's available for you. That is what we are here to do, is to help you get the mark that you want and deserve, but as efficiently as possible. Now, one more site, and it's not so much a site, it's more so a really quick Google search that I just want to tell you about, that again, I use all the time. I'm just going to move this over here now, is this one, right? If I want a currency, what I do is I'm EU or GBP, for example, right? If I search EU or GBP, instantly the sterling rate will appear here in front of me, right? So I'm just going to go up the 5-year sterling rate here, for example. So EUR is the code for euro, and then GBP is, of course, the code for sterling. Put the two together, and then you get the euro. So if I want, for example, the dollar-euro rate, EUR, there you go, $1 equals 90 cents at the moment. If I want the euro-dollar rate, then as you can see, it is €1 equals 1.11. So just before you go into the exam, if you're going to be talking about, say, and there's a range of ways you could be talking about sterling or dollars, you might, for example, want to have a very quick way to get the rates in terms of a context around export, or the impact of Brexit on sterling, which is exactly what we're going to be moving into now. Or you might want it in the context of, well, how has the euro changed for when it comes to attracting tourists from different parts around the world? It's just really, really quick. I use it all the time, and it can just be a very helpful thing if it's that last minute thing that you need before a test. If you're going to be talking about one of those areas, or you're expecting to, it's just a very, very simple thing to use. Okay. Now, that takes care of my first promise to you. So my first promise to you was that I would take you through 3 sites that could dramatically give you or speed up the amount of information that you get in very easy, consumable ways. Now, I have to tell you, the CSO is a wonderful website, right? It really, really is. The Central Statistics Office. It can just take quite a while to get around it and to get what you want. That's why I want to give you the shorter, faster, quicker ways of getting what you need. So, can I now bring you to talking about Brexit? Okay, so it's died down a little bit in the news because if we're not really in a position right now where the US isn't involved in a large degree anyway, where the EU and the UK aren't negotiating right now. They're not negotiating right now. However, we are 1 week away from the UK election, and believe me, after that, we will be straight back into it. So what I want to do is I want to give you a very good, again, easy, decipherable way just to keep up with what's going on at the moment. And that is a fantastic infographic that I found here on the BBC, right? And that is what happens after the election. So next week, okay, so I'll just say, okay, so today is the 5th, this day next week, on Thursday next week, there will be the general election in the UK. And what will happen during that election will ultimately determine what happens with, or it'll certainly determine the next stage of the process. I can't say the election is going to determine the outcome of Brexit because it can't, right? It can't. There's so much more to happen along the way. So it just means that there's a lot going on, right? There is a lot going on right now, and it's certainly, I find it like fascinating, truly fascinating watching, as I'm sure a lot of people out there do. But it certainly is something that is really it's caught a lot of people's attention. But in actually trying to figure out where we're at and where we're going, that is what matters. So what I'm going to say here is, so what happens after the election? We have the election, and there's a couple of different things that could happen, right? So we could have the existing deal. Now, the existing deal is the one negotiated between the EU and the UK, right? Some of you may remember the day that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, and Leo Varadkar, the Taoiseach, they met in Liverpool, and both of them put forward a suggested deal. And I won't get into the detail of it, because even if I did, and even if you understand it an awful lot, we still don't know what the final deal would be. So I would simply be updating you, and then in a week's time, we could be out of date. But the point is that deal, that is the existing deal we're talking about. That deal was agreed between the EU and the UK, but it hasn't been agreed yet by Parliament, right? So it still has to get through Parliament, and that hasn't been agreed. So that if it is the case that the Conservative Party, they're also called the Tories, if the Tories win the election next week, and they win on a majority basis, and let's just say that there are enough people to, let's say that there are enough people then to drive that through Parliament, where they will actually agree at a majority level, well, then that could be the existing deal. Now, what I don't know is whether there may be a whole other deal agreed as a result of that, as a result of the Tory party winning a majority. Okay, there may be. Now, I've just had a question in here from somebody who says they've just sent me a message on Messenger, which is, could I ask them, or could I email them the presentation? Absolutely, I'm only delighted to do that to that person who just asked me, of course. And just like I asked, they have already sent their details there to me on email, so I can, or on Messenger, so I can make sure and email this afterwards. Absolutely, and I would only be delighted if that teacher was to share it with her students. So thank you very much indeed to that person who just sent us a note in. Okay, so the other thing, of course, is that the Brexit deal would be renegotiated. Now, if there is a majority in Parliament, it means that they have the UK government, whoever it'll be at that stage, will have more power they will have more scope within the negotiation, because if their own party is a majority and they expect their own party to vote the process through, well, then they're not relying on trying to keep as many people in Parliament happy. So this could go in either direction. Okay, so we could have a party, let's say, who wants to renegotiate it so that they have a closer ties with the EU, or of course could go the other way, where they want further distance from the EU and more independent ability to exact and to implement whatever it is that they would like to do. So we don't know that. Now, if the Conservative Party get an overall majority, that could be the case. But of course, if there is what's called a hung parliament. Now, a hung parliament is generally what we've had in Ireland, but we've never really called it that. We call it a coalition. A hung parliament is when you don't have a majority of one party in power, but you need more than one. Now, currently in the UK, there are a variety of parties and they have very different views on what should happen. And therefore, if you have two different parties with two very different views who become a hung parliament, it'll be very, very hard to call. And therefore, this option around renegotiation becomes more likely. Now, then we could have another referendum. So this is what the Labour Party have put to the people. They're saying that they would support a second referendum to go back to the people. Now, what's unclear is what would that referendum be, right? So would it be remain or leave? Would it be the existing deal or remain? Would it be the existing deal, remain or leave? Would it be the existing deal, remain, leave or no deal? So we actually don't know. We don't know how many options it would be. It could be 2, it could be 3. But this is what a number of the parties are putting forward. And then there's the Liberal Democrats. So they're called the Lib Dems, and they are putting forward the idea that, that you would cancel Brexit. How you would do that is to revoke Article 50. And that would basically be, look, guys, actually, you know what? Everything that happened since the 2016 referendum, forget about it. We're just going to go back to normal and thanks. That would be cancelling Brexit. And it is possible to do that. What's not possible to do is to revoke Article 50 with a view to simply implement or to trigger Article 50 again. So what the EU has said is that you cannot, the European Court of Justice has said, you can't just revoke Article 50 with a view to buying more time. If you revoke Article 50, you're doing it to revoke Brexit. And then, of course, the other thing is that we go back over here and that a deal actually isn't done. And that could happen if the Tory party no longer agree with the deal that they originally agreed with, or that it can't get through Parliament and there is no deal. Now, what I will say about this, though, is the time frame is very, very tight, right? Now, we've had multiple deadlines in Brexit before. Personally, I've been working in an all-island conference that's happened on 5 different occasions where they brought all the parties, the political parties of the government together, the lobby bodies, the trade bodies, the trade unions, the representative organisations, the agencies, all of these were brought together 5 times since the referendum has happened, and I have been there. I've moderated sessions, I've spoken at it, etc. So I've been watching Brexit unfold, both at a public, at a very national level, as well as I have my own company, and I've been looking at it from a private sector level. And deadlines have been deadlines and deadlines and deadlines. So therefore, what I would say about this one, this is the next one. And at the moment, unless a deal is done or there is another deadline extension, there would be a no deal on the 31st of January 2020 as it stands. And we'll see. We'll see what happens at that point. So as you can see here, this is where it stands. And this infographic, I think, is really, really useful because just this picture explains so much. And it also encapsulates all of the views around the table at the moment. So this would be the Tory party view. This one really is hard to call. This is a catch-all, but primarily a renegotiation could be possible in a hung parliament, which, as I say, is if there isn't a majority of one party. Referendum is what the Labour Party and a couple of other parties are putting forward, some of the smaller ones. The Liberal Democrats are putting forward to cancel Brexit by revoking Article 50, and no deal might happen if a deal obviously is done. Okay, now the question is though, so who is likely to actually get in on this day next week? Now, I'm very conscious that this is a live broadcast, and I am telling you this at 7:25 on the 5th of December. So I could be out of date in what I'm just showing you within 5 minutes. But that's not the point. The point isn't how live or how up to date my information is. What's important as an economist is knowing where to find the information when you need it. And where I am looking at the moment is over here on The Guardian. And again, all these links are they're all going to be available for you, okay? All of them are going to be available for you. On one, if you simply email us in your email, if you send it in to us on Messenger, we'll make sure that you get the link afterwards, and you'll get all of the respective links. So just let us know, we'll make it as easy as possible for you. But this is what I'm watching, right? And this is the poll currently of where where things sit, right? So what you can see here is the Conservative Party are at the highest rate at the moment of 43%. And they want, at the moment, to go forward on the existing deal that they've negotiated. Then we have Labour down here, so they're at 32%. So this party want a second referendum. Then down here we have the Liberal Democrats, and they're the party that want to cancel Brexit. Then we have the Brexit party down here, and as you can see there, their popularity has basically, as you can see here, what they have lost, the other party has gained. So they would like either a no-deal Brexit or well, just as distant a relationship as possible. And then we have the Green Party down here at another lower level. So and so all of this is to do with what's going on there. But this is the one that I'm watching. So and this marked the stage at which Boris Johnson was the. This is the stage which Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. So it's from here on you can see what has been happening. So I will leave it up to you, of course, to figure out where you think it's going to go. But what I will say is this is what I'm watching between now and next week, and I'm it's fascinating to watch what is going on. I mean, the number of general elections in the UK over the past while, and just the sheer drama of what has been going on from a political point of view directly impacts on the economy, which is exactly now where I wanted to lead back to. At the moment, the politics is driving the economic deal, but I want to just move away now from looking at what could drive that, and let's now just look further at what is going on, or what the impact of this is. One of the key things that's happening is, I'm just going to go back here to a blog that an article that I wrote here a little while ago, is of course that so what I did here is that I wrote this for the 4th of September, and so I asked the question, what is the impact of the fall in the value of sterling since Brexit? Now, this is a 4-minute listen, so you can listen, okay? So you can actually, if I was to play this, I've turned off my sound obviously, but if I was to play this, you can basically listen to this article as a podcast. You can download it and you can listen, okay? So that is how you can do that, and you will hear me read out the piece. But the point I was making is that like the value of sterling has fallen since Brexit. It has fallen, and that is because there is lower investment in the UK, and in particular, as there was a recent Sky News report that quoted that there's been an 11% decline in the amount of business investment since Brexit happened, and the reason for that is uncertainty, right? It's actually not predicated necessarily on the outcome, right? So some people would argue for Brexit, some people would argue against it, right? And I'm not going to get into the arguments for or against, because the purpose of this video is to look at the economic impact of what could happen as opposed to different opinions. However, what is 100% clear and in agreement by everybody is that Brexit and all of this uncertainty has led to businesses not being sure what's going to happen next. And if you're not sure what's going to happen next, you don't know, well, should I invest in more technology? Should I invest in more people? Should I expand my operation? Or should I contract my operation and move it somewhere else? So that is what has led to that. And as a result, we have seen the decline, right? So this has been since the election, right? Since the referendum. The referendum happened here. As you can see, sterling has fallen and it hasn't recovered up to that level since. And over that period of time. Now, bear in mind, I published this on EDCO, on our website, positiveeconomics.ie. That's the dedicated website for the book. So as you can see here, there's been a fall and a fall and a fall and a fall and a fall. Now it's since, well, do you know what? Let me get the update for you, value for you right now. Very simple to do, GBP-EUR. So I'm just going to put in here GBP-EUR 119, okay? So it has, as you can see here, it has climbed since I wrote the piece. And that is for a couple of reasons. Some was the hope on the deal, and so on, right? We could get into interpreting that, but let's just look at the impact of this. So a devaluation sterling, so what does that mean? Well, just as you would answer this question in Leaving Cert, just like you would on a paper, I have 3 points and I back up those points, because that is what's really important to do. And so, for example, there's an increase in the price of our exports, because if the value of sterling has fallen, well, then what that means is that the price of the euro has risen. And if companies are invoicing in euro, it ultimately becomes more expensive to buy our goods if you're in the UK. And you can see all about that, right? You can see, I give you an example about how that is the case. Further on down here then, as you can see, we also have, what we also have then is the context of imported inflation. So if there is imported inflation, that means that our goods become more expensive, of course, and therefore people in the UK are importing that inflation. That is what happens. So that affects the inflation figure of people living in the UK, which of course also has its own impact thereafter. And down here, I also give you a link then to what exports we sell into the UK, which they import. And I am not going to tell you the answer to this one, but to what the first one is, but you can get it on the link down here, okay? But the other thing is that it's a concept that we discuss in the book, is the different forms of inflation, which are cost push and demand pull. So let me just briefly elaborate on those so that you're aware of what they are. So cost push inflation is, imagine that I'm running a business, right? So actually, let's say I'm running my business. So I run a training business. So I run education programs for teenagers, and I run them for companies, and I run them for people, right? So let's say that my costs are rising. My costs are rising because the cost of, my materials has gone up, and the cost of my staff has gone up, and the cost of diesel has gone up, which means that it's more expensive for me to deliver my service. So as a result of that, I am now going to increase the cost of my education programs to our customers. That's called cost push inflation. In other words, the costs push up the price, right? So that's called cost push. And this is exactly an example of imported inflation, because if things become more expensive in the UK because the value of the sterling has fallen, well, then it means that the costs are rising, and then that pushes up prices. Now, just for completeness, I now just want to tell you about demand pull. So demand pull is, let me go back, let's say, to my business. So I run an education business, and I run programs, let's say, for teenagers, right? And we have run, let's say, 10 programs last year, and our customers are delighted with them. And as a result, now they want 20 programs next year. The problem is that we actually don't have 20, we don't have enough time, and we don't have enough staff to deliver all of those. So now, and you could say, of course, we should expand, and I understand that, right? But let's say that we can't. Let's say that we can't do that. So then I go back to our customers and I'd say, we've got only 15 times that we can deliver it, and we are going to put up the price. So therefore, only those who really want it will pay extra. So let's say it goes from 10,000 euros up to 15,000 euros, or 10,000 euros up to 13,000 euros, and then only the customers that really want these programs would then ultimately buy them. That's demand pull. In other words, the demand is pulling the price up so that we can, as you would have studied in the equilibrium chapter, then we would have cleared the market by bridging demand and supply. Okay, so that's just a little aside there on just cost push inflation and demand pull. This is an example of cost push. Now, I just noticed here that we have a comment, so I'm just going to read that out. And that is a comment that says, delighted to be able to tune in to such concise and well presented information regarding the economy. Thank you very much indeed for such a lovely comment. Oh, you're very kind. And of course, if anybody else has any comments, please do pop them in. And of course, if you want, as I say, if you want any details, alternatively, you can always send us a message on Messenger. We're delighted to respond to those as well. Now, you can see there the impact of that inflation. You can see how it's been pulled up there. From the referendum, inflation was at about 0.5%, and of course the inflation has increased. Now, the other impact, of course, of the sterling change in price is that it becomes more expensive to come over here. So if it is the case that the euro becomes more expensive, well, then buying euros with a view to spending them in Ireland then becomes more expensive. So let's say that there's a family right now in Manchester, and they would like to go, they'd like to visit some part of the Wild Atlantic Way, or they would like to come to Dublin and they would like to visit Temple Bar, and the Book of Kells in Trinity, and they want to go to Dublinia, and they want to go to a variety of different places. It's going to cost more money. Let's say they want to take a day trip to Galway and they want to also go to the Cliffs of Moher. It all costs more. So as a result of that, when you take that into account, the tourism figures, then, as I'm sure you can imagine, they're going to fall. So therefore, if you look here, look at how they've fallen. This was back when the referendum happened. In the second quarter of 2016, 1 million people, that's the population of Dublin, 1 million people came over to visit Ireland in that quarter. And look where we were at by 2019 quarter two, is that we were actually down by approximately 30 million people. Am I right? Yeah, well, 16 million people. Sorry, 16 million people. So as you can see, it has declined. And if you look at Q4, you can see how it's changed, and all along the way there. So Q2, of course, is the summer. It is the busier time. So you can see that all of the impact of the fall of the value of sterling, it has mattered. It really has mattered. So again, I just want to make the point here that this blog is available for you, and there's other articles in there that I'm not going to go through during this video because we've a lot to do. But what I do want to say is that they're going to be there on a monthly basis. I'm going to be writing a piece and podcasting it. So you can download the podcast and listen to it. Do you know what I love about podcasts, right? Is you can actually be listening to them while you're sitting on a bus or, on your way into school or whatever. And you're studying. It's like free study time. Brilliant. Love them. I listen to a lot of podcasts. So again, just wanted to make that point. So the first thing I wanted to say about the impact of Brexit on the Irish economy, and thus, what may be considered, what you might need to consider for the exam, is how does this affect Ireland? And one of the things is the fall in the value of sterling. Now, the second one that I want to direct your attention to is based on, go back to our national income equation, C plus I plus G plus NX, consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus net exports. Those of you who've studied National Income Chapter 11, you will know what I'm talking about. Those of you who haven't yet, you won't, but it is a huge part of macroeconomics. So don't worry if you don't exactly know what I'm talking about, but C plus I plus G plus NX is key, and that equals GDP. That is key for the study of economics. So if we were to think about, in an environment where people are, where they have disposable income, then you're going to have, which you would say of the Irish economy, a number of people have disposable income. So if it was the case, then the people have disposable income, what's going to happen is that people are going to spend money in the economy. And therefore, the amount of expenditure that happens in the economy is going to be rather significant. In other words, the consumption part of our GDP is going to be quite high. And what drives our consumption? Well, a range of things do. The amount that we earn, that drives consumption. The amount of people in employment, that drives consumption. But one other thing that matters is, how do we feel the future is going to be? Do we feel that employment is going to go up? Do we feel our wages are going to rise? And this isn't about whether they will or not. This is about whether we feel they will or not. So this is why I want to lead you on to this page, right? And this was an article that was just published on Tuesday. And how we can measure how people feel is down to, excuse me, what's called consumer sentiment. So you can see here, Irish consumer sentiment lifts as Brexit crash out threat declines. So here is a poll, it's around consumer sentiment. It actually jumps to 77 points in November. And so I'm just going to read the very quick piece here of this. Irish consumer sentiment rebounded sharply last month as the threat of a crash out, Brexit, receded. The latest KBC Bank Ireland ESRI consumer sentiment rose to 77.1 in November from a 6-year low of 69.5 recorded in October. The 7.6 monthly rise was the first material increase in 6 months. Now, let's just think about what that means, right? When you look at a consumer index, above 50 means people are expecting to expand their consumption. In other words, they're expecting to spend more. Now, that's how they feel. That's not to say they will, but it's how they feel. This might happen because they think that they're going to have more money. They think that there's going to be a second person in the house in employment, or a third or a fourth. It may be just because they they have got additional savings, or there mightn't be any basis for it, but they just feel better, right? So if it's above 50, it means that it's an expansion. If it's below 50, it's in contraction. So when you see a level like 69.5, that does mean people are expecting to spend more. But when we see a 6-year low, we're just saying that that level of positivity was at the lowest level in 6 years. 6 years. So people have been expecting to expand their consumption since 2013. And then it hit a 6-year low in October. Now, October was the really crunch time, was when we didn't know if we were going to be facing a crash out Brexit. And need I remind you of this? Oh, it's gone. Need I remind you of just the sheer difference of the economic projections of the economy from the Department of Finance and the others in the difference between a disorderly Brexit and an orderly Brexit. Disorderly is crash out, no deal. Orderly means there would be an agreement and phased delivery of some sort. So that was at a 6-year low, and then it really jumped back up again, up to 7.1. Now, do you see why? At the beginning of this session, I said to you, you know, a lot of people aren't talking about Brexit at the moment, and they're not doing so because the UK election is on next week. So what have people got to talk about except the election? Excuse me. So when you put all of that together, then you might say, well, you know, has this whole Brexit conversation gone away? No, it hasn't gone away. But it just means that people's minds are on different things at the moment. And therefore, if they're not as worried about a crash out Brexit, as you can see then, the sentiment rose. But that's the one to watch. That is a very interesting indicator to watch. And that is what we call a predictive indicator. So a predictive indicator is when you think that it's one that we look at if we want to try to figure out what we think will happen with something in the future. So consumer sentiment would be a predictive indicator for consumption, which, as you know, is part of the C plus I plus G plus NX equation for GDP. All right. Now, so that was the second point that I wanted to make is about, so we have the devaluation of sterling. I'd already mentioned about the decline in business investment. And as I say, the rationale for that is how this conversation has led to uncertainty. Whether Brexit is going to be good or bad for the UK economy is much debated, and I don't really want to get into that debate right now because that's all it would be, is a debate. The purpose of this session right here is to help you, the students and teachers of economics in Ireland, about how to be able to get more marks and better marks than in the past. Well, or at least as much as you can. Now, I want to refer to one more thing, okay? And this is a point that often people forget. Now, in both books, in both Positive Economics, the first one, or in the second one, there's a big focus on, you know, the supranational organizations like the European Union and the United Nations and so on. But, you know, we have to think that Brexit, of course, is a European Union issue, but there are so many more European issues that are going on. And often people forget about the fact that, like, did you know that we have a new European Commissioner, and we have the first female Commissioner ever in the history of the European Union, which I know is actually still pretty young, but we have the first female president ever of the Commission, and she has recently released a speech where she outlines her vision, and, you know, there's been a new budget that has been approved up to 2024, and like so many more things, right? But it's often difficult to keep up with what's going on with Europe until now. Because what I want to do is I want to show you how to do that. So on the 1st of December, the statement by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and this was a statement during the ceremony of the House of European History to mark the 10th anniversary of the Treaty of Lisbon and the start of the mandate of the new College of Commissioners. Now, all I want to tell you is that a range of her speeches, which are some of them are quite short. Now, I read her first one. It was really interesting reading. She spoke all about global climate change. She spoke about digitization. Did you know, for example, that Europe is responsible for 9% of the world's carbon footprint? 9% only. Now, of course, you know, you don't want it to be responsible for any, but it's actually an interesting figure. She said 85% of the world's data is not used. We talk about data these days as if it is the world's most valuable we say data is the new oil, for example, and yet 85% of it isn't used. She speaks about the ways in which companies like mine can get funding in the future. Now, I've been listening to the Capital Markets Union and the Banking Union For years, I have been briefed in Brussels myself on these things years ago. And now we're, you know, she's saying that she wants to push it forward. That won't necessarily be easy, but I read the speech, and it's quite a long one, but it's fascinating to look at all the different facets of Europe and how they affect our lives. And these are the things that we're talking about. So I have a group of teenagers at the moment in with me on work experience. You know, we speak about the impact of decreasing roaming charges in Europe, or eliminating roaming charges while in the EU. We speak about global climate change. We talk about the fact that the jobs these people are going to be going into in 10 years' time, many of them haven't existed yet. I had a conversation with people today about how they feel about competing against robots in the job market in the future. And ultimately, her speech is all about that. So the reason I wanted to tell you this is, if you go to simply the European Commission, I'll give you this link. You don't necessarily need it. If you simply Google European Commission, actually, John, I'll do it for you. European Commission. Okay, it'll bring you directly there. I think that that's possibly an easier way to get there, but at the same time, I'll give you the link for sure, right? So back here then in the von der Leyen Commission, is if you scroll down, you can see who we do, what we are, and all those. Remember the budget that I mentioned? That's just been approved. Here she is. There she is, the woman herself. And like, just so many things that I could talk about. But just, you know what you do? Come down here, down to the news, events and publications. That's where it all happens. This is when I need a quick update on what's going on up to the second. Like, this was produced today. The EU adopted 297 million in concrete action for refugees and local communities in Jordan and Lebanon, right? Or down here, as I say, the speech, that's not the speech I read now, it's another one, really good. And this one is all COP25, that's all about global climate change. You can see what's going on, and you can just go in here into all news and you'll see exactly what they're doing. Click of a button, okay? So as you can see then, we go on and on and on. There's one about energy. This is more about the working methods, striving for more at home in the world, water reuse, right? There's an absolute plethora of them, and of course they're updated all the time. But if you just need something quick around like what's important in Europe, there's a whole section in there on Brexit, and it's quite complicated. If you know, it is quite complicated. I'll show you where it is, but you know, I keep an eye on it, and unless there's something big and breaking, it generally tends to. I'll tell you what's there. Like, it's really good in terms of actually giving you the real detail. I'm just going to get it for you right now. There we go. That's the link. So I've gone a bit of a square trying to get it for you, but here it is. So this is all about the negotiations, and it's just about citizens' rights, and you know, it's quite dense in terms of what's there, and it's also, you know, until there is actual updates, it doesn't update all the time. So there is the Brexit stuff in there, but you can get that. It's fine, but you know, you can get quite a lot of that in other places. So there were the three things that I wanted to talk to you about: was the devaluation of sterling, the consumer sentiment, and also just the other issues that are going on in Europe, because a lot of people forget those. So, and they're the websites in which you can get them. Again, as I say, I find that this infographic here is super useful, really, really useful to explain what's really going on, and in terms of looking at, well, which one of these is likely and what's driving that. As I say, then you have the updated polls. What I love about these sites is that they're dynamic. Is that if you look at these sites tomorrow, you will see what's different. You will see how the polls are changing. You will see, in the case of the monthly economic bulletin, you'll see all of the updates. So do you know the way I want you, do you know what I'd love for you to think about, right? Is imagine that there are thousands of people all over the world helping you right now to get a better mark in your economics exam, because they're trying to prepare all of this data for you in really easy to remember ways, and in fun, interactive ways as well, like in the DBEI interactive board. So that's the way that I just, if you could think of it in that way. So I'm now going to move on to the third part of our session tonight, and those are study tips that I recommend. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to first of all just check and just see the commentary, and so if any of you have any questions on anything that I've spoken about so far, whether it is the sites that you want to get updated information on, or what's going on with Brexit, or indeed anything that's on your mind relating to the economics exam. Please do let me know. Pop the question in there, and I'm very, very happy to answer you. And so I see that I can see here who's watching. Oh, sorry, not who's watching, but I can see the number of people that are watching, etc., which is great. And I'm also just going to check Messenger in case there has been anything else. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that we are all okay from that point of view. As you can tell, this actually genuinely is live. Well, it couldn't be anything else anyway since we're on Facebook Live. But just wanted to check, is there anything else there that has come in? Okay, yeah, looks all good. Yep, looks all good there. It looks like that we are up to date. Super. All right. So now I'm going to move on to the study tips then that I would like to think that are going to be helpful for you. That is what I'm here for. So I'm just going to go over here to go to examination study, and I am going to click on examination information, and I'm going to come over here then to the 2019. Sorry, I'm going to go here to the sample. This is slightly changed now. Sorry, not the examination information. I'm looking for the actual, the examination material archive, apologies. And I'm now going to go into the exam papers. I'm not going to go into the solutions. I could, of course, but I'm not going to go out there yet now. I'm just going to go to exam papers, and I'm going to select the year, and the year is going to be 2019. And the exam here is going to be Leaving Cert, and the subject is going to be economics, okay? And let's go for the higher level paper. All right, and as you can see here, I'm just going to scroll on down here, down through it, okay, and I'm just going to go into section B, okay, right. So one of the things that people tell me all the time that they're concerned about is that whole idea of running out of time in the exam. Now, this works for economics, and it works for English, and it works for every subject. Here is my top tip when it comes to managing time in the exam, is start now, right? I don't mean start the exam now. What I mean is start practicing with your time now. Now, look at this question here. Question 1A, so the two small parts: define the economic terms, individual demand and market demand. Outline 3 factors that would affect market demand for fitness watches. All right. Now, then after that, assume the brand of Irish crisps is in equilibrium. Explain with the aid of a separate diagram in each case the impact of all these 3. And then the third part down here then is part C. So the latest figures from the Residential Tenancies Board show rents continue to trend upwards, with average national rent moving from 1,100 or increasing to €1,122, right? Then we have a graph here. We have to explain the impact of the implementation of rent control and the possible economic consequences on the Irish rental property market. All told, we have 75 marks. Now, what I would do is I would consider, okay, 75 marks is for that question. Between the 2 sections, we have 400 marks, right? 400 marks, and we have 2.5 hours in which to achieve them. So that means that I should be, let me just work out the calculator here now. So I have 400 marks, and I have 2.5 hours to achieve them. 2.5 hours is 60, and 60 is 120, and another 30 is 150. Okay, so therefore I have 2.66 marks to get per minute. And that is if I'm going for 100%. Now, some of you may be saying, well, sure, I'm not going to get 100%. It's not the point. The point is that is the amount of marks. If you were to aim to cover the entire ground, you want to get 2.66 marks per minute. Now, if that question is worth 75 marks, divide 75 by 2.66, and 28 minutes should go on that question. Right, so what that means is if I scroll on right back down now to here, if I was doing a question like this at home, right, again, I know I'm speaking to 2 different audiences here, Some of you are going to be doing your Leaving Cert this year and closer to the time, and some of you are going to be in 5th year where you wouldn't be doing or looking at the Leaving Cert question yet. But what I will say here is it's just important to mention that if you have 75 marks for this question, and we worked that out, is that you should be testing yourself, can I do my economics full question at home right now in December in 28 minutes, right? So what I suggest you do is put on the timer on your watch, sit down, do your question, give yourself 28 minutes, no looking at phones. And by the way, I'm not one of these anti-phone people that you can hear out there. I'm just talking about you wouldn't have your phone the exam. So put yourself in exam conditions, close the door, don't get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of it, nothing. Sit down, give yourself 28 minutes, do as much as you can, as fast as you can, as well as you can, right? And then stop. See where you're at and see how much more you have to go. And let's say then you need to review the question because you want to make maybe A better, or you need to clarify your graph in B or something else like that. That's fine. Time yourself again. See how long more you need. And now you've got a budget. You know that if you put in 28 minutes and you got halfway through part C, but you weren't really happy with what you did in part B, and it's going to take another 15 minutes to finish off to the level that you want, that is the way in which you manage your time. If you can do that in December, by January you might be down to 11, by February you might be down to 10, and then of course you're into your mocks. By March you could have it perfect. And then you go into the exam in June and you are well aware of how long things should take. And if you have any stronger points or weaker points, you can handle them then. But the number one issue that I find that people talk about is certainly time. Now, I've just noticed there's somebody else watching that I know, so I'm just going to give a wave there to Eleanor Walsh. Hi, Eleanor. It's been a few years since we met, but I remember you, and I hope that you're doing super well in college. I remember you came on one of our programs there a while ago. I still certainly do remember you, and I really hope that life is treating you exceptionally well. So just want to give a shout out there to anybody who I know, and of course anybody that I don't know as well. You're all more than welcome. And I do hope that you're enjoying and benefiting from what we're talking about tonight. Right, the second thing that I would say when it comes to this, right, when it comes to the whole concept of time management, is I would also say that it's important to understand in the exam that you need to be ruthless with your time, right? Now, I told you there earlier on, I lecture for a postgraduate cert group. So these people are after their degrees, right? So we're talking about that type of level. And I'm correcting their exams. I'm giving them the marks. And I can always tell if people run out of time because their writing gets more scribbly, and where I see their answers get shorter, and where they start making mistakes and so on. And when I generally see that is right after I see a question that has gone on far too long, and where they're taking longer and longer and longer to answer maybe the earlier questions. And I know what goes on in their heads. I know. And what that is, look, I'm doing really well at this question now, and I know I should only spend 20 minutes on it, but I'm going to spend just a little bit longer because I know this question really well, and I'll just keep going. And they do keep going. And then, of course, that 20 minutes turns into 35, and then they're running to catch up with themselves in other questions. Now, as one teacher said to me one time, it's an awful lot easier, so much easier to catch the first 50% of a mark than it is to get the last 50% of the mark. So much easier. So what I would say is be ruthless with your time. Is that if you have dedicated 20 minutes to work on something, work on it for 20 minutes in the exam and then move on. Even though you may be thinking, oh God, oh really, really, really. So it can be really, really hard for people. And it can be hard for people to move on because they really want to show off in the exam. And I get that. But just remember, the top 50% is so much harder to get than the first 50%. So I'm just going to pop over here to comments for a moment. So I see some people are tagging others to tune in. Absolutely. And by the way, of course, you can do that long after we're finished as well, because you can always watch the recording live here on Facebook, of course. Then, in addition, I see Lynn, you've sent in your email address. Absolutely, I will, of course, send on the resources to you. more than happy to do that. And we will also let you know when we're running our next Facebook Live. Then I see somebody from our own team has actually just popped in here and said, that's great advice, Susan, for answering questions during exam. Doing a trial run several times, never heard that from any teacher lecture before. It's a tip worth writing out. Worked for me, I have to say, and there's no need for that type of anxiety in an exam. You don't have to be thinking, God, am I going to have enough time? You shouldn't have to worry about that. Not then, right? Really and truly, not then. You shouldn't have to worry at that stage. What you should be thinking about is, how do I answer the questions? At that stage, you should be in a position where you have your exam technique right, where you have your time management technique right, where you have your mindset right, and all that's left then to do is just to match the content that the exam is looking for with the answer. That's all that should be left by then. And don't think it's luck. Don't think, oh God, maybe I'll just be lucky if I get this right. And maybe I'll just be lucky if I can get everything done in the right amount of time. That's not the way to look at this at all. It is totally within your control, but I absolutely would say that it's imperative that you understand that it's in your control and that you can fix this, or you can put this in place before long before the exam. So that's what I would do. And it's also like, it's kind of like playing a little competition with yourself as well. So I think that has been a super helpful way in which that has helped me. But of course, it doesn't stop when you do your Leaving Cert. This will work for you as well when you're in college. It'll work for you when you're in the workforce. It'll work for you in a plethora of other times. I just also see another person there has joined who I recognise. So just to say hello there to Niamh. Lovely to meet you there. And Niamh, thanks so much for tuning in. I've also got another message in here on Messenger saying, hi Susan, I'm watching your live video. If it's okay, would you be able to send me the links and presentation to my email? And she has sent across her email. Really enjoying your video. I'm finding it very helpful. Thank you so much for your kind comment. I won't name you because, of course, I don't want to do that. But of course, absolutely, I'm more than happy to send across all the details to you. So really do appreciate your note. And again, can I just say, if any of the teachers watching tonight, if you have other teachers who you teach with or that you know of, please do let them know about this recording. And if you ask them to send me their email, I can also then let them know when the next one is taking place. Just for those of you who weren't here earlier on, just want to mention to you that the next Facebook Live is going to be on housing. So it's going to be on all the matters that I discussed earlier, which include, for example, the price of rents, what's driving property prices, different property prices around the country, how it's affected by Brexit, how it's affected by foreign direct investment, and a plethora of other things. All of that, as I'm sure a lot of you know, that there was a motion in the Dáil yesterday about this. It's interesting, actually. I just got a message there from somebody that I know in a different country that I'm over there quite a bit delivering training on the economy, and one of the guys that was on a course sent me a message to say his daughter is coming to Ireland, going to be studying in Dublin for a couple of months. They're finding it difficult to find accommodation. What will that mean? Is there anywhere that I would direct him to? And that's the thing, is that at this age, for those of you who are students, at this age, if you want to have an Erasmus year in a different part of the European Union, for example, or in the UK or in the US, you might think, well, the hardest thing to do is to get into the university or to get your college place or to get the university to partner with you. It's these logistical issues that matter. So if you think about it, if we're going to have an issue in bringing more foreign students into Ireland, well, then that has an impact on our global footprint, on the diversity of people that we have studying in the country, on foreign direct investment, because, of course, if, let's say, the next Google want to set up in Dublin and they can't find housing for people, well, then that affects that and a variety of other things. So the next Facebook Live will be focusing specifically on housing, as I say, and anybody that you know who might be interested. And again, just to be clear, it will be focusing on it from a Leaving Cert point of view. So anybody that's interested, of course, you're absolutely more than welcome to join. But I do just want to let you know that I will be focusing on this from the point of view of students. students doing their Leaving Cert. Now, to move on to the third time management tip that I'm going to give you is, this is actually something that, again, pertains to many more areas of study, I suppose, and life in general, is that if you're going to pursue my first one, right, and that is giving yourself a certain amount of time to do a question, test yourself, stop, and then, to test yourself to see how much more time do you need. So then you need to be able to finish off your homework and thus your exam question in a short period of time to be able to meet the exam. It's very important to rest in between those times, because the analogy of this is like sprinting. Is that if I sprint, right, that's a big burst of energy, and I start and I sprint and then I stop. Like, we in the Olympics, we don't see people sprinting for 5 kilometers, nor 1 kilometer. In fact, you don't see that. If you're going to run for a kilometer, well, then you're going to have to you're going to have to be able to maintain the pace, and you're going to have to be able to do it for a while, and you can't sprint all the time. So what I would say is that if you're going to put that very focused time at home into, like, whether it's study bursts or answering exam question types of bursts, make sure that you give yourself a rest afterwards. And a rest could be after I do 45 minutes of my economics homework and I put 28 minutes into doing an exam question like the one that I have up here. And then after that, I'm going to spend another, let's say, 15 minutes fixing what else I wanted to do. Then it's very important that you take maybe 20 minutes off and just give your brain a chance. The very same way a sprinter would do the same. You can't sprint all the time. Believe me, I've tried, and you can't sprint all the time. And I'm reading Henry Shefflin's book at the moment. Many of you may know of that hurler. He's well known around the country, and now the manager of Ballyhale Shamrocks. And, he talks about the focus of rest and recovery in sport and how it's changed over the years and how it's become more of a focus now because it's helpful and because it helps bodies rest and heal faster. But what it also does is enable you to have more powerful bursts as well. So it's really key. It's really, really key that you would do that. They were the 3 time management tips that I wanted to give you, which is to start practicing your time management like from today. Start from today. Don't wait upon a ticking clock in June and hope for the best. You can do it today. By the way, there is one other benefit of that. I remember when I didn't do that with my homework, I was dawdling around, picking up the phone, putting it down, and going up to the bathroom, coming back, and maybe I'll stop here now. And when you actually put your mind and you sit down and you focus to the exclusion of all else, you can be so much faster at actually doing your homework. So you will, and then you can deservedly get your rest, learn how to manage your time, get your homework done faster. What's not to love? Okay. So when we look here at question 2, then I'll just, for the last 20 minutes, as I say, please do send in your questions and your comments and so on. That's what I'm here for. Really happy to take them, and I'm keeping an eye on them over here. Of course, if you send me something on Messenger, I'm not going to read out your name because I won't. It wouldn't be fair to do that. And anybody that wants to send me an email, as in send me your email address, I'll happily send you the resources, the links, and I'll put you on the mailing as well for the next one so that you're aware. Okay. So outline 3 characteristics of a monopoly firm. That's quite a definitional question. Explain why some degree of monopoly power must exist for price discrimination to occur. And then, so as you can see there, both of those 20 marks, now those 20 marks, if that was me, right, if I was looking at that now, those 20 marks, I would dedicate 20 marks divided by 2.66, 7.5 minutes for that, okay? That's 7.5 minutes will go into that. Now, another thing is some questions will take less time than others, and obviously some questions will take longer. What's a very good idea, I think, is when you get your paper first is, and this goes for your Christmas exam, this goes for every exam I've ever done, and even now, like I'll be doing exams for life. So what's a really good idea is to just spend 1 minute. The minute you get the paper, read it all. Read it all, start to finish. And you know why? Is because your brain is remarkably smart. If you simply read through the entire paper, your brain will act like Google does right there, and it'll turn what you're looking for, it'll go looking for that, almost like a Google search within your own knowledge bank. And you might think, oh my God, I have no idea. Oh, sugar price discrimination. Oh, I should have studied that. And oh, monopoly power. Oh, I just did that the other day. Why can't I remember? And it's so natural that those types of things can happen in the exam. You would be surprised that when you read through the paper, and let's say you do a couple of other questions and you're comfortable there, and then you go back and you look at this, you would say, well, actually, I could start it. And you might realize that you do actually know more than you think. And that's because your brain, mine does anyway. When I go and I ask it, I say, like, sorry, I don't tell my brain, I don't talk to my brain. My brain's well able to talk for itself. But what I do is that I read the questions, and that is almost, as I read the questions, it's like typing the words into the Google of my brain. And maybe half an hour later when I come back, I might actually, retrieve the information that I need. That's happened to me so many times. So as you can see there, the first two parts are a bit like part A. This is outline and explain. They're quite definitional questions, and then explain using a clearly labeled diagram the long run equilibrium position of a monopoly firm. So that's a graph. Now, of course, all the graphs for the market structures, it's really important that you're aware of them. And then it says, with reference to the diagram you've drawn, explain why a firm's demand curve under monopoly differs from a firm's demand curve under perfect competition. This, by the way, would have been a lovely, lovely question if you were strong on your market structures. Really lovely, because it is straight out of the book. Then it says, big Western technology firms such as Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon are accused of being bad, big, anti-competitive, addictive, and destructive to democracy. The presumption that big business must necessarily be wicked is plain wrong. So that's the statement. Often this happens when the paper setters are looking for kind of current, relevant things that are happening in the economy, is that they'll take a statement out of an up-to-date publication. As you can see here, this one was from January, right? And then they'll ask you to interpret, or else they'll lead from that, and then they'll ask you questions about, okay, so how would you react to this, drawing from your study of economics. So state and explain 3 advantages of large-scale business using examples from the technology industry. Now, of course, these are examples from the technology business. So, of course, one of them might be that it creates a lot of specialized employment, and that specialized employment tends to be very well paid. And we could elaborate from there. Now, again, if you're thinking, yeah, but how much should I write? That is the structure that I have those blog posts in. So you can see here, when I talk about the increase in the price of our exports or imported inflation in the UK, of course, you're not expected to go and have actual up-to-date figures. That's what I'm doing. And the reason I'm doing that for you is so that you know where to get them. You've got the links in there then. And because I wanted to link them together to other pieces for you. But the thing is that look at the structure of my answer. I make a point, which is, as the value of sterling falls, the amount that Irish businesses were charging in sterling and translating that back into euro falls. Statement. Okay? Then I give the reference. So for example, a company selling this would have translated into that. Explanation. Alternatively, if that company was pricing their products, the amount that a UK company needs to pay has increased. And then I finally say this makes Irish exports in the UK less competitive than in the past. So point, reference, explanation. Point, reference, explanation. Point, reference, explanation. That is what I always did when I was in school, was point, reference, and explanation. So make your point, give a reference, which is a metric perhaps, or in this case, it might be, your point could be, is that they provide a lot of specialized employment. Your reference to that might be the amount of people in employment in the technology sector has risen considerably over the last period, over the last, let's say, 10 years. Now you might say, yeah, but Susan, how am I supposed to know that? You see, this is why I'm here to try to make it easy for you, is that it's so easy, so easy to keep up to date on things just by, like, you can check up on this regularly, check up on the DBEI. This was the resource that I gave to you at the very, very beginning. You could check up on this like really quickly. Certainly do it just before the exam. And here I can see, well, in information and communication, It's the second fastest sectoral employment growth in the country as of the last quarter. So that looks really impressive. If you know statistics like that, now you don't remember the 8,200, or you don't even have to remember that it's the second fastest. But if you know that it's growing, that backs up your point. And it gives a sense that you have got what you need to be able to answer your question on the tip of your tongue. Okay. I just see another person has joined here. Michelle Sweeney McNeil has just joined. So you're very welcome, Michelle. Thanks so much indeed for joining. And I hope you're enjoying and benefiting from our video this evening. And again, to each and every one of you, there's been lots of people have come in and gone out and come back in again. So all throughout, as I say, you're more, really and truly, more than welcome to this video, and of course to every future one as well. Now, then it says, outline the possible effects in a monopoly market structure. Monopoly here, of course. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to change the view of that. There we go. Okay. So monopoly would be of a company that dominates a sector. And of course, if it was a number of companies that dominate, then it would be an oligopoly, right? So Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon don't actually compete with each other. If you think about Apple, right, they produce iPhones, they produce iTunes, they produce a lot of apps, incredibly profitable business. But they don't compete against Google, who provide search. So I could Google something and the results will appear, and then around those searches also ads appear also, and that is their business model. And then of course there's other aspects to them as well in terms of what they like the Google Suite, Google Docs, Gmail. So now they sell G Suite for business and a whole lot more things. And then Facebook, of course, Facebook provides a social media platform and subsequently advertising as well. And of course, I am using their platform right now to record and store this video. So thank you to Mark Zuckerberg and team. And then of course, Amazon is a massive store, online store of goods where I can log in and I can buy books, or I could buy groceries, or I could buy whatever else. So none of these firms actually compete with each other. So this question, you might say, well, isn't this an oligopoly? Absolutely not. It would be an oligopoly if Apple competed with Google and both of them were the two biggest firms in the world that focused in on their area, but they don't. They're not an oligopoly. They're a monopoly in the context of this question. Now, again, you could also say, yeah, but Apple has Samsung that competes against it, and Google has Yahoo that is competing against it, and Facebook has Snapchat that competes against it, and Amazon has eBay that competes against it. I understand that. The point is that if you have got a monopoly structure, which is what the question refers to, is if you outline the possible effects of a monopoly market structure of government regulation to reduce anti-competitive behaviour. So I also see now that we have another person who has joined us. So I just want to give a shout out there to Chloe. Thank you very much indeed, Chloe, for joining us this evening. You're very welcome. And again, anybody, as I say, I'm just, the only reason I keep saying this is people are dipping in and out. So I just want to say, anybody that wants the links to what I am going through here tonight, please do send me a message on Messenger with your email address, and I will get them out to you in jig time. Okay, so then, as you can see then, as we're moving on then to question 3, same process, okay? Same process. We start off here with a kind of a structure that pertains to definitions. Then we go down here. Now this one is a little bit, not mathematical, but more interpretation of numbers as opposed to simply graphs. So when you look at the price elasticity of demand of customer A and B, you need to be able, so using your knowledge of PED, price elasticity of demand, what does it mean? What do you think would pertain more to holidaymakers and business travelers? Now, let's think about them. Let's think about this, right? I'm not going to get into a conversation around price elasticity of demand. Those of you who are in 5th year, you may not have come across this yet, or you may. Those of you in Leaving Cert should have by now. So your teachers are, more than able to explain, and I'm sure they have discussed what the elasticity of demand is. But let me talk to you about this conceptually, and let's talk about this in the context of what I spoke about earlier when it comes to Brexit and tourism, right? So bringing you back, I wrote about tourism and Brexit back here in our blog, right? So I spoke about how the number of tourists have fallen since the referendum, right? So the number of tourists, and they have, right? The number of tourists, this is the summer of 2016, the year of the referendum. And here now in the summer, 3 years later, so you can see we are down by about 16,000 people, right? And of course, if we're down by 16,000 people, we're down by 16,000 people and the money that they spend. So let's go back here to the point of this. Now, if I am somebody sitting in Manchester right now and I'm thinking about where would I like to go on holidays next summer? Am I going to go on holidays in Dublin? Am I going to go on holidays? Or you know what? Do you know what? Instead of going to Dublin and all of the attractions that I mentioned there a while ago, how about instead I go to Belfast and I go to the Titanic Centre and I go to the Giant's Causeway and I love Belfast, I have to say. All of the fantastic things that I can do in Belfast. Then I don't have any currency issues. You know what? I could do something differently. The value of sterling has fallen, but what other currency is actually good value against sterling? You know what? South Africa. It's a place I was myself last year. The rand is at an incredibly good rate. So why don't we go? Now you might say, oh, hold on now, Susan. Like there's a big difference between a flight to Dublin and a flight to Cape Town. Yes, but let's leave all of those things to the side if we simply focus on currency. Again, just want to give a shout out there. I see that Michael Lyons has joined. So hello, Michael. Great to see you. And thank you very much indeed for watching. And indeed to every single one of you. I really appreciate your time on this Thursday evening to discuss matters of economics, particularly through the lens of the Leaving Cert. So, right. Then they might say, oh, you know what? Why don't we go to London? Let's go and visit a show in London. Let's go to Edinburgh during the festival. I lived in Edinburgh for a summer myself. And there's a month-long festival of comedy and music and theatre. You know, let's do that. And let's get the train up and let's not get any plane. Do you see where I'm going with this? Is that the holiday maker, right? The holiday maker here referred to in this question, they have lots and lots of choices. Their demand can be very elastic. In other words, they have so many choices. They can go to places that don't require flights and they don't require currency conversion, or else they can go on a longer flight. They can do so much. They have got a lot of flexibility around what they do. Now let's think about a business traveler. So I am one of those, and a business traveler would be somebody who says, right, do you know what? I'll give you an example. I was over in San Diego about a month and a half ago now, and I was over following up on business meetings that I had there in May, right? So I co-founded the Ireland Business Forum San Diego, and I needed to go back over and to follow up on those meetings. And I was working with the university over there and a whole load more, right? Did I have a choice about where I was going to go? Well, of course not. I needed to go to San Diego. Now, only for a moment, just for a second, I'm just going to touch on, I wrote another article on this, and I'm just only going to let you know that it's there, and that is the impact of more flights between Ireland and the US, right? Ireland now has a lot of different choice that you can fly now between Ireland and the US. So in my case, when I had to go to San Diego, for example, I could fly directly to Los Angeles, and I drove 4 hours south down to San Diego, and off I went. Do you think possible that I could say, do you know what, actually, I kind of feel like going to New York instead? And sure, yeah, no, of course not. I couldn't just say, sure, I think I'll go somewhere else. So again, from that point of view, I had far less flexibility. Now, I wasn't looking for the flexibility, but the point is that my demand was going to be far less than in another scenario. As a holiday maker, I have far less choice, you could say, about where I want to go. Now, just want to say I have another message in here. This person says, hi Susan, super lecture. I would really appreciate your links and any other resources that you could provide. And he gives me his email address there. Just again to that person, I'm going to give a shout out to say, absolutely, only delighted to do it. And please do pass them on. That's what they're there for. I'm only delighted to share this. And again, as I say, they're totally and utterly dedicated towards those doing their Leaving Cert this June, and also people in 5th year studying for that same Leaving Cert. So of course, more than happy to send them across to you, and anybody else that sends me a message on Messenger, as I mentioned, I'm only delighted to do that. Okay. So just gonna come back here for the last couple of minutes as I elaborate on this point. So when a business traveler wants to go somewhere, the business traveler typically has a destination in mind that they have to go to. Now, let's think about that a little bit further. Let's say I don't do business in San Diego, and let's say instead that I am somebody where I'm going to a conference, right? Or let's say I'm going on a trade mission, or like there's lots of things that could direct me to a place. But generally, a business traveler doesn't wake up one morning and say, I quite fancy going to Dubai, or I quite fancy going to Cork, or I quite fancy going to Glasgow. It doesn't happen like that. What happens in the context of Brexit, or sorry, not Brexit, geez, in the context of business traveling, is that a thing brings you to a certain place. And it's as a result of that thing that you go. That is why the elasticity of business travelers are so much less. Now, you could, of course, also go back even further. And you could think about this and you could say, well, yes, while all of that's true, surely the economy in that country will have a bearing on where I choose to go. And of course it would. So, but that goes back even further. So I might say, okay, well, at the moment, due to the uncertainty of Brexit, I'm not sure about doing business in the UK. Therefore, I'm not going to look for conferences. I'm not going to be looking for business there. And there's certainly elasticity there. But when you are already doing business somewhere, or if there's a really interesting conference within your particular sector, then it's not going to matter. It doesn't matter as much. You don't have as much control, because I have been working on developing relationships in San Diego now for almost a year. I'm not just going to drop it because of something, because I just changed my mind, or maybe because the economy in San Diego isn't as strong as maybe now in Los Angeles, because you develop relationships there and so on. And that is what decreases your elasticity. You basically become less elastic. So we're now coming up to the end of this session, and I'm just going to summarize what I spoke about tonight. So I started off by telling you about the really in my opinion, hyper useful sites that can help you to establish a much better, much faster way of getting access to the information that you need. And I spoke about that in the monthly economic bulletin, the DBEI, the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation dashboard with 60 economic indicators. And I also spoke about, if you really quickly Google EUR GBP or any currency pair, you'll get the exchange rate super quickly. We then went on to look at Brexit. And I started off by telling you where things are at with a very simple and useful infographic provided by the BBC. And then I've also given you then, I told you about the way in which the population are looking to vote as of right now in the UK based on a poll. And you can check it out how that plays out later on. And then I delved into 3 different areas that you could consider when it comes to the impact of Brexit, then, from the devaluation of sterling, which is I've written about on the Positive Economics blog. I've also spoken about the Irish consumer sentiment and how that's changed, and finally also about the about what's going on in Europe, and particularly our new European Commission president. From then, I went on to look at my top 3 tips of time management. Number 1, in my opinion, is to practice your time management with your homework, and that will speed up your homework. It'll give you a very good sense of what sort of time that you need in order to finish your, or to really manage your time effectively. And the other thing I said was to make sure and be ruthless in the exam. You saw exactly how I gave how I documented how much time to spend on each question, and then how you need to be ruthless. I just another message in here. Thanks, Susan, for a great evening of economics. My email is such and such. I would appreciate if you could send me the video and the links. Many thanks. You are so welcome indeed to that person, and absolutely I will make sure to do that. Then the last thing I mentioned is the importance of rest. It is so important. As I say, if you don't believe me, believe Henry Shefflin. He's the guy that can tell you all about it. So it's important. It's important to rest after you sprint. No one sprints forever. And then what we did was that we looked at the individual questions, and I just spoke about the structure of the exam and how that works. And then we just had a chat about the general underpinning of these concepts within the Irish economy today. So, live here from, I'm currently in Dublin, live here from Dublin. Thanks so much indeed to the EDCO team who helped me organise this evening, and to each and every single one of you that sent in messages, lovely messages. Really, I appreciate that immensely, and we'll certainly add you to the mailing list for the next session. As I had said, we'll send you out the links and the resources. Lots more to come from me, I promise. As I say, the next Facebook Live is going to be on housing. It's a really big issue, and it's an area that a lot of people are looking at from a plethora of economic angles. Loads more study tips to come, loads more useful websites, and lots more. So, as I say, from me, Susan Hayes-Culleton, the Positive Economist and co-author of Positive Economics, thank you very much to each and every one of you for joining me, and have a wonderful, happy Christmas. Thank you, and good night.